Pamela Prescott has been an educator for 38 years, a teacher who rose to be principal at a Christian school. Then things went badly wrong between her and her employers. A school board member phoned her at home.
He said, we don't need you to come back to campus at all. We are dismissing you. It was a very arduous and a very painful thing to go through.
Cherie Spivey lost her son Nick when he was 20 years old and addicted to drugs. He died after she sent him to a Christian rehabilitation center.
It was the worst, and still is. It's just, a lot of times it's just hard to believe that happened, that Nick's not here anymore.
What the Prescott and Spivey cases have in common is that when each woman wanted to take legal action over their losses, their way was blocked by the old but rarely discussed practice of Christian arbitration.
I didn't know what that was. I didn't have a clue. I had heard of mediation before, but Christian arbitration I had not heard of.
It's a poor witness to our God and to our faith if our first resort is to take things to court.
Bryce Thomas, as well as being a licensed attorney in North Carolina, is a nationally prominent Christian arbitrator who works with the Institute of Christian Conciliation. The Institute's rules govern most of the Christian arbitrations that take place in America.
You might work with both sides and you bring them together in a safe environment where they can have the most open, candid conversation and face all the stuff between them. One might owe the other money, and they say, we need somebody to decide what is fair. We can't arrive at what is fair. We're going to tell you all the facts, and then you make a ruling, much like a judge.
Arbitration has long been accepted as an alternative for settling disputes without resorting to a court of law. Recently, though, there's been controversy over companies and organizations using it to avoid their legal obligations, and demands have grown for new laws to ban abuses. But however arbitration may have been used or misused, it has rarely been seen as having anything to do with religion. That, too, has been changing. What's less well known is the rise in arbitration that's religious in nature, and specifically Christian arbitration, and it's been rising among organizations that engage in purely secular business, like this company selling hardwoods in the Pacific Northwest. Scroll down all the terms and conditions, and you'll see you're agreeing to submit any dispute you may have with the company to Christian arbitration, held in Seattle here under Christian conciliation rules. And it's the same with a very different kind of business, this one renting out vacation cabins in North Carolina. Rent one of these and you're promising to undergo binding arbitration in accordance with the rules of procedure for Christian conciliation. Christian arbitration is said to have biblical precedent. The Apostle Paul insisted in his first letter to the Corinthians that the early church members should avoid turning to civil legal authorities for resolving their internal disputes, and instead come to a settlement among themselves. Thomas and other arbitrators like him used precepts laid down in the Old and New Testaments to guide their rulings. One of the nation's few experts in this specialty is in California. He's a Jewish rabbi, Michael Helfand, who's a law professor at Pepperdine University.
At its best, religious arbitration is an opportunity for two parties who have shared religious values to resolve those disputes in accordance with their religious values.
Professor Helfand emphasizes the constitutional separation of church and state. He says this prevents courts from taking sides in a difference of religious opinion or practice between, for instance, a faith institution and its employees.
And if you didn't have religious arbitration, you'd be saying to all these employees there's nowhere else for you to seek justice.
The case of Pam Prescott seemed to raise such an issue of religious differences when she was fired from the school where she was principal, and which we have agreed not to name at Prescott's request.
I'm a biblically based believer, so my religion is the scripture.
Prescott's contract of employment required her to waive her normal right to sue for wrongful dismissal if aggrieved.
The contract also made this Christian arbitration, conciliation, mediation, and arbitration mandatory. I did not have the opportunity to take it to court.
Though she had signed a waiver, she was upset to find her employers dragging their feet for years over the Bible-based alternative that was stipulated. But eventually, both sides did get to a formal arbitration presided over by Bryce Thomas.
I had something like 20 or 30 or 40 witnesses that I listened to, and there were also probably thousands of pages of documents.
7 days, it went on that long, with calling witnesses, and before this we had to have depositions, and just like you would do it in a civil court. And a ruling was rendered by the arbitrator who ruled in my favor.
Arbitrator Thomas ordered the school to pay Prescott about $160,000 to cover lost income and damage to her reputation.
We're not there to please either party. We're trying to render a decision that is God-pleasing, first of all, and secondly, blesses the parties. But we got to deal with truth.
The school certainly wasn't pleased with the arbitrator's findings and tried to appeal it, surprisingly enough in the civil courts. The appeal failed, but Prescott's legal costs wiped out almost every dollar she'd been awarded. The school declined to discuss the case with us on the grounds that it concerned actions by a past administration. The Spivey family's distressing arbitration experience came when Cherie Spivey tried to sue the Christian Drug Rehab Teen Challenge for the wrongful death of her son.
I wanted someone to answer, me, you all told me Nick was doing really well. What happened? What went wrong? He's only been there 30 days. Just so many questions, and they were refusing to give me any information.
Spivey discovered that her son had signed a waiver when he was being admitted to the rehab, most likely still high on drugs. It said that he or his estate, should he die, would give up all rights to sue Teen Challenge in court and would instead undergo Christian arbitration.
My attorney would not be able to speak at all. She could attend, but she would have to sit in the back and not talk. It was led by all Christians, and to me it felt like we would go in there and pray, do Bible study, kiss and make up. And I wasn't willing to do that.
Eventually the matter was settled, at least in financial terms, with Teen Challenge paying out an undisclosed sum of money. Teen Challenge declined to comment on the case to us. Spivey remains unsatisfied about the facts surrounding her oldest child's death and frustrated in her efforts to find them out.
They don't give you the opportunity to get justice. Some things you can't just sweep under the rug and say, I'm sorry that happened. let's move forward from here. Some things, I'm sorry, is just not enough. And ultimately that's what Christian arbitration is, everybody just finds a way to get along.
Experts in the field, however, remain convinced that religious arbitration works well side by side with secular law.
The match between the systems is pretty good, and here's why. On the one hand, American law makes sure that the process is fair, and on the other side of the equation, you have Jewish law, Islamic law, Christian forms of law making sure that the rights and responsibilities match the religious expectations of the parties.
The fact that we rely primarily on Holy Scripture, I don't think that needs improving.
All the same, aggrieved parties in the religious arbitration process can often be left feeling that the system too easily works against them. At the least, it leaves them wary, certainly about the religious label.
I haven't lost faith in Christianity or Christians. It's just that I am more careful with the idea of the name doesn't mean anything.
For Religion and Ethics NewsWeekly, this is David Tereshchuk reporting.